Hello, my name is Dennis Ng. I live in New Jersey. I am currently the president of the New Jersey chapter of the AMMV, which is the Dennis A. Rowland chapter. And I am regional vice president, Region 3, which covers New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I've been involved with the American Merchant Marine Veterans Organization since 2016. I was at a supermarket in New Jersey, and I saw someone wearing an AMMV hat. His name is Sam Bassini. And I asked him about it. He said, "You should come down to our meeting." So that's how I ended up going to the meetings at the DAR chapter. He has an interesting background because he did the Murmansk Run, and he transported locomotives to the USSR at the time. I got involved with the chapter in New Jersey because I was involved with this program called the Veterans History Project by the Library of Congress. And with the Library of Congress, they wanted people to go out and interview veterans. After you make the recording, you send it to the Library of Congress. It becomes part of their permanent archive. There's much more information about those who served in the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard, but there wasn't that much about the U.S. Merchant Marines. So I started interviewing members of the chapter. I wasn't very successful because by the time I got involved, they wanted to talk to me about it and tell their stories, but once I scheduled an interview, they couldn't show up for health reasons. And oftentimes, their health deteriorated. I couldn't interview them, so I only managed to interview about 3 of them. Move forward to 2019, the past president, Hank Kaminsky, was president of the chapter for 10 years. And he said, "I can't do it anymore." I think seeing so many members pass away took a toll on him. So somebody said to me, "Could you take over the chapter?" I was just there for the interviews. So I said, "Okay, I'll do it, just to keep it going." No, I wasn't a Merchant Marine. My father was a Merchant Marine. My father has an interesting background. He was born in China in 1912. And he was in the Chinese Navy, but the Chinese Navy was a collection of 19th century warships. In 1937, when Japan attacked China, and that's called the Second Sino-Japanese War, the Chinese Navy didn't last very long. And my father, because he was a sailor without a ship, the Chinese Navy said, "Thanks for your service, you're honorably discharged," which meant that they didn't want to pay him anymore because there was nothing to pay him for serving, for being involved in the Chinese Navy because there was no ships. So he went to Hong Kong, which is British territory, and he found work on a British steamship. And he was a sailor, so he knew about a sailor's life. Now at the time, he was married to his first wife and he had 2 daughters. But during the turmoil, he lost his wife and he lost his older daughter. He still had a younger daughter, so he had to find someone to take care of his younger daughter while he was out at sea. So he found his family. And in return, they agreed to take care of his daughter, and in return he helped this woman's 2 sons find work on British steamships. Once my father's first wife had passed away and all the children died, the woman turned to him and said, "You are 9 years older than my daughter," who was 19 years old at the time. "You have a job. You have some financial security. Would you like to marry my daughter?" So my father ended up marrying her in February of 1941. But at that time, Japan still left Hong Kong alone. But my father set out to sea, and this woman that he married was pregnant. And he went out to sea and landed in Brooklyn. Suddenly, Japan, on December the 8th, invades Hong Kong, which, because the international date line was December 7th, 1941. Now, my father couldn't go back to Hong Kong because the ship that he was on would have been seized by the Japanese Imperial forces. So my father was in Brooklyn, and he and other sailors realized that if you joined American Merchant Marine, the working conditions were better than on British ships, and the pay was better. So they ended up signing up with the U.S. Merchant Marine instead of sailing for the British Merchant Navy. So my father ended up doing 12 voyages in the Atlantic during World War II. Now, the woman that he had married and who was pregnant, she fled inland and she survived the war. And my father found out she survived because her brother, who my father helped find work in the, on a British steamship, when he came to America, he joined the U.S. Army. He was with the Signal Corps. He was an interpreter. And he was sent to Kansas City to, in preparation for helping the war effort in China against Japan. Well, our strategy in the war against Japan changed. We shifted from using China as a launching pad against Japan. The focus now was on island hopping. So we had MacArthur and we had Nimitz hopping on these different islands, getting closer and closer to Japan. Here's my uncle sitting in Kansas, waiting to be assigned to go overseas, and that didn't happen until the Japan surrendered. Now, he was sent to China because now you had this looming civil war between the nationalist forces and the communist forces, and we didn't want to see that civil war break out. So he was sent there. He goes back to Hong Kong. He finds out that his sister is still alive, and she had a daughter. That woman is my mother, okay? So what happened is that he contacted my father, who was still sailing with the U.S. Merchant Marine, told him, your wife is still alive, and she has a daughter, your daughter. So my father, of course, sent money back to help her. But in Hong Kong, it was so filled with refugees that even with money, there was no place to live. So my mother ended up living in this apartment building under the staircase. It was 2 sawhorses and 3 boards. And my mother kept my sister there during the day while she went out to work, and she came back, and that was their living condition. And my mother didn't come to America until the end of the 1940s, and that's when I came about, because once she got to America, then they could resume their family life again. So that's essentially how I became interested in the American Merchant Marine. Now, my father died a year after the Merchant Mariners of World War II were recognized as veterans in 1989. He was always proud of his service, but he never got the recognition that others got. Like, for instance, my uncle, who served in the U.S. Army, he never went out to the front lines, and not through no fault of his, I'm not blaming him. But after the war, he had the full GI benefit. And my father, whose ship was torpedoed off the coast of Africa in 1943, and who did the Murmansk Run, and in December of 1944, he brought supplies from England to keep the Germans from capturing Antwerp, which was their goal during the Battle of the Bulge. He got nothing, but my father was always proud of his service, and the only thing he got when he died was a gravestone and he got a flag, an American flag on his casket. I can tell you right now, if my father was still alive, he would have been so proud, because he was finally getting the recognition that he was denied, because people focused on certain branches and ignored other branches. And I'm glad I could do what I've done so far in memory of his service to the U.S. Merchant Marine. So I'm continuing to do this, and if we can, I'm hoping that we can continue to have these wreath-laying ceremonies at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier past this year, and I'm going to do everything in my power to keep it going, because if those who know about the U.S. Merchant Marine don't get involved, we're going to be forgotten again. And that's so important, that their memory, their sacrifices, and their commitment is remembered long after they're gone.